A father's love can move mountains. But what happens when that love becomes a weapon? On August 12, 2024, Michael Anderson received a phone call from his twin sons they'd been racially profiled and kicked off a luxury cruise ship in 87 minutes. This billionaire CEO shut down 800 voyages worldwide, stranding 100,000 people. He thought he was delivering justice, but his revenge had a hidden cost. A dying man lost his chance at a life-saving heart transplant. This is a shocking true story of how righteous fury turned into a tragedy that destroyed everyone involved, including the man who started it all. What city are you watching this video from, and what time is it, by the way? If you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. The air in the port of Miami's Terminal G was a familiar symphony of chaos. The rolling thunder of suitcases on tile, the multilingual babble of announcements, the distant roar of a massive cruise ship's engine spooling up for departure. For Liam and Noah Anderson, identical twins with futures as bright and polished as their brand new leather carry-ons, this was just the overture to the summer of their lives. At 19, they were mirror images carved from different stones. Liam, the elder by 7 minutes, had a fire in his eyes that matched the bright blue of his designer hoodie. He was a debater, a political science major at Yale, and carried himself with the coiled energy of someone ready to argue a point into the ground. Noah was a quieter twin, his gaze more introspective, dressed in a bright blue sweater. He was the artist, the coder, a computer science prodigy who saw the world in lines of logic and elegant design. Their destination, a prestigious summer internship at a leading tech incubator in London, a stepping stone to the empires they planned to build. Their penthouse suite tickets on Sapphire Seas Cruises Voyage 118 were a graduation gift from their father. They weren't just accommodations, they were a statement. Polished, confident, and unapologetically successful, the Anderson twins were the embodiment of the new black elite. They navigated the priority security line with practiced ease and made their way to Embarkation Gate for to be. The gate area was a microcosm of society. Businessmen hammered away on laptops, a young family tried to wrangle a screaming toddler, and students in college sweatshirts slumped in their seats, scrolling endlessly through their phones. The twins found seats near the window overlooking the dock, where their massive Sapphire Seas ship was being prepped for the voyage. "You think they'll have the new ice cream sundaes?" Liam asked, breaking the silence as he watched the ground crew. Dad said the Sapphire Seas Diamond Lounge was a bit overrated, but the onboard sundaes were legendary. Noah smiled, not looking up from his phone, where he was reviewing a complex algorithm. "You're spending 7 days in a suite that costs more than a used car, and you're worried about the ice cream. It's about the principle, Noah. It's about the full, unadulterated penthouse experience." Their banter was light, filled with the easy confidence of youth and privilege. They were aware of the occasional glances they received. Two young black men in expensive streetwear, sitting in the exclusive Group 1 boarding area. They were used to it. It was the background noise of their existence, a hum of societal static they had long ago learned to ignore. The embarkation staffer, a woman in her late 40s, with a severe blonde bob and a name tag that read Susan, made the first boarding announcement. Her voice was sharp, strained, cutting through the terminal's hum. "We will now begin pre-boarding for our Sapphire Seas Diamond Elite members, active-duty military personnel, and families traveling with small children." A few people shuffled forward. The twins waited. "Now boarding Group 1, our penthouse and suite passengers," Susan announced, her eyes scanning the small assembled crowd. Liam and Noah stood up, pulling their carry-ons. They were at the front of the line, their ship cards gleaming on Noah's phone. As they approached the podium, Susan held up a hand, a gesture as sharp and sudden as a slammed door. "I'm sorry, I need you to step aside for a moment," she said, not looking at their phones, but at them. Her gaze was clinical, a quick up and down assessment that lingered a moment too long. Liam frowned. "We're Group 1, penthouse suite." "I see that," Susan said, her voice laced with a saccharine condescension that was more insulting than outright hostility. "There just seems to be a discrepancy. Please wait over there." She pointed to a barren spot against the wall, away from the boarding lane. Confusion, then a familiar, hot prickle of indignation rose in Liam's chest. "A discrepancy? What kind of discrepancy?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss it right now, please." You're holding out the line. She gestured impatiently for the couple behind them, an older white pair in matching beige travel vests, to proceed. She smiled warmly at them. Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Miller. The Millers offered the twins a brief, apologetic shrug before shuffling past, one by one. The rest of Group 1 boarded, businessmen in suits, a woman with a small, yapping dog. In a carrier, a young tech bro in a hoodie far less expensive than Liam's. Each of them received a smile and a cheerful, enjoy your voyage. The twins stood by the wall, the sole occupants of Susan's invisible holding pen. Humiliation began to curdle with anger. Every passenger who walked by gave them that same look. A mixture of pity, suspicion, and a palpable sense of relief that it wasn't them. What is this, Noah? Liam muttered, his voice low and tight. What the hell is this, Noah? Ever the pragmatist, kept his cool. Maybe there's a system error, a double booking. It's happened before. A system error that only affects the two black guys in the line. Come on. After Group 2 had boarded, Noah approached the podium again, his demeanor calm and respectful. Mum, could you please tell us what the issue is? Our ship is going to depart soon. Susan finally looked at them, her patience worn tissue thin. As I said, there's an issue with your tickets. They've been flagged by security. The word hung in the air, security. It was a word loaded with implications, a weaponized term that could strip away rights and invite scrutiny without cause. Flagged for what? Liam demanded, stepping forward. His voice was louder now, attracting more stares. We bought these tickets 2 months ago. We checked in online. We passed through terminal security. What could possibly be the issue? Susan's lips thinned into a bloodless line. She picked up the phone at her desk, pointedly turning her back to them. Gave her to be. Yes. They're still here. No, they're becoming agitated. Agitated, another loaded word. They weren't agitated. They were being denied their rights. They were being publicly shamed for a reason no one would name. The gears of a familiar, ugly machine were grinding into motion, and they were caught in its teeth. Liam felt the cool confidence he'd worn all day evaporate, replaced by a searing ancestral rage. This wasn't about ice cream sundaes anymore. This was about something far more fundamental. Noah put a hand on his brother's arm. Don't, Liam. Don't give her what she wants. But it was too late. The final boarding call for Sapphire Sea's Voyage 118 echoed through the terminal. The gangway door was about to close, and with it, their summer, their opportunity, and their dignity. Susan put down the phone and faced them, her expression a mask of grim satisfaction. I'm sorry, she said, the words dripping with insincerity. We're unable to permit you to board this voyage. You'll have to speak to a customer service agent at the main concourse. The ship was right there. They could see it through the window. A behemoth of metal and dreams, ready to leave them behind. The humiliation was complete. They were stranded, branded as problems, as security risks, as agitated young men who didn't belong. Liam stared at her, his mind racing. He could scream. He could cause a scene. He could demand a supervisor who would likely take another hour to arrive and offer a practiced, empty apology with a handful of meal vouchers. He'd been down that road before. They all had. But this time was different. This time the insult was too great. The stakes were too high. He looked at Noah, whose calm facade was finally cracking, revealing the deep hurt beneath. And in that moment, Liam realized they had a tool they had never used before, a nuclear option. He pulled out his phone, his hands shaking slightly with adrenaline. He didn't search for customer service. He scrolled to his favorites. What are you doing? Noah whispered, I'm calling Dad. The name on Liam's screen was simple, Dad. But the man on the other end of the line was anything but. Michael Anderson was not just a father. He was a force of nature. He was the founder and CEO of Apex Solutions, a multi-billion-dollar cloud computing and logistics software company. Apex wasn't a household name like Google or Amazon, but in the corporate world, it was the central nervous system. They handled the back-end operations for a third of the Fortune 500, including global data management, server hosting, and most critically, the intricate booking and operational software for several major cruise lines. One of their biggest clients was Sapphire Seas Cruises. Michael Anderson was in a glass-walled boardroom on the 50th floor of a Chicago skyscraper overlooking Lake Michigan. He was in the middle of a tense negotiation with Japanese investors. A deal worth $250 million. His Rolex watch gleamed under the recessed lighting as he gestured towards a slide, showing projected revenue growth. His phone, set to vibrate, buzzed quietly on the polished mahogany table. He ignored it. His rule was simple: no interruptions during major negotiations. It buzzed again and again. A frantic, insistent pattern. Michael paused mid-sentence. His sons knew the rule. They would only break it for an emergency. A flicker of parental dread, cold and sharp, cut through his corporate persona. He held up a hand to the Japanese contingent. "My apologies, gentlemen. Please excuse me for one moment." An urgent family matter. His voice was a calm baritone, betraying none of the sudden anxiety churning in his gut. He stepped out onto a private balcony, the wind whipping at his tailored suit. "Liam, what's wrong? Is no okay?" "We're fine, Dad, we're not fine." Liam's voice was strained, a mixture of fury and disbelief. He quickly recounted the events at the gate, the condescending tone, the vague accusations, the public humiliation, and the final, galling denial of boarding by the embarkation staffer. Susan. As Michael listened, the serene cityscape behind him seemed to fade away. The boardroom, the multi-billion-dollar deal, the Japanese investors, all of it dissolved into an irrelevant haze. His mind was transported to that fluorescent-lit terminal, standing beside his sons. He could feel their shame, their anger. It was an anger he knew intimately, a ghost that had haunted him throughout his own climb. From a rough neighborhood in Detroit to the pinnacle of the tech world, he had built an empire, created a world of comfort and privilege for his children, precisely to shield them from this exact brand of petty, soul-crushing racism. And he had failed. The calm CEO persona vanished, incinerated by a white-hot paternal rage. "Put the embarkation staffer on the phone," Michael said, his voice dropping to a dangerously low temperature. "Dad, she won't talk to us, son. Put her on the phone. Now, use a speaker." Emboldened by the steel in his father's voice, Liam walked back to the podium. Susan was busy tapping at her computer, processing the voyage's final manifest. "Excuse me," Liam said, holding out the phone. "My father would like to speak with you." Susan glanced at the phone with disdain. "I don't speak to the parents of passengers. It's against policy. If you have a complaint, you can file it through the proper channels." "She says it's against policy," Liam relayed. Michael's voice boomed from the speaker, clear and commanding, cutting through the terminal noise. "This is Michael Anderson. Your name is Susan, correct? I'm not calling as a passenger's parent. I'm calling as the CEO of Apex Solutions. And you, Susan, have just made the single biggest mistake of your career." The name Apex Solutions didn't seem to register with Susan. To her, Michael was just another angry parent, albeit one with a powerful-sounding title. She rolled her eyes. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to end this call. We're done here. I can call security if you like. You do that," Michael's voice retorted, cold as ice. "But while you're waiting for them, I suggest you get your station manager on the phone. Tell him that Michael Anderson is on the line, and that he has 60 seconds to get my sons onto that ship." Before I demonstrate exactly what proper channels look like, something in his tone, the absolute, unwavering certainty, finally gave Susan a sliver of pause. But years of bureaucratic intransigence and a deep-seated sense of her own authority made her double down. "The gate is closed. The ship's boarding is closed. There is nothing I can do," she said with finality, turning her attention back to her screen. It was the ultimate bureaucratic shutdown, the weapon of the powerless, and she wielded it like a shield. On the other end of the line, on a balcony 50 floors above Chicago, Michael Anderson closed his eyes. He had given her a chance. He had tried to resolve this at the lowest possible level. He had hoped for a sliver of decency, a moment of human connection that would override the protocol. He had received none. "All right," he said softly into the phone, a chilling resignation in his voice. "Liam, no. I want you to stay right where you are. Don't move. I'm going to handle this." He disconnected the call. He strode back into the boardroom, his face a granite mask. The Japanese investors looked up, startled by his abrupt re-entry. "Gentlemen," Michael announced, his voice ringing with an authority that left no room for argument, "something has come up. We will have to postpone this meeting. My assistant will be in touch to reschedule before they could protest." He was already dialing his chief technology officer, a man named David Kim. David answered on the first ring. Michael, is the deal done? Forget the deal. David, are you at your desk? Yes. Why? I want you to execute Protocol Omega 7, authorization code Anderson Alpha 001. Effective immediately. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Protocol Omega 7 was a ghost in their system, a theoretical kill switch designed for a catastrophic, nation-state level cyber attack on their infrastructure. It was a digital scorched earth policy, allowing them to instantly sever all data links and API calls from a specific client. To protect the wider network, it had never been used. It was designed to prevent a meltdown, not to cause one. Michael, what are you saying? David stammered. That's the protocol for Sapphire Seas. Using it would take their entire booking, check-in, and operational software offline worldwide. It would ground their entire fleet at their ports. I'm aware of what it does, David, Michael said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. They have denied my son's boarding on a voyage out of LAX based on what I can only assume is racial profiling. The local staff has refused to rectify the situation, so we will rectify it for them. Execute the protocol. But Michael, the contract, the legal exposure. We could be sued into oblivion. The collateral damage. Our contract with Sapphire Seas has a force majeure clause that includes systemic security threats. I am the CEO, and I am declaring that their behavior towards my family constitutes a threat to the integrity and reputation of our business partnership. Their system at this moment is compromised by unacceptable prejudice. We are containing the threat. It was a breathtaking, audacious twisting of corporate legalese, a rationalization born of pure, unadulterated fury. Michael, please. Let's just call Richard Branson or whoever runs this line now, David pleaded. No. The time for calls is over. Execute Omega 7. That is a direct order. David Kim, loyal to the man who had built the company from nothing, let out a shaky breath. He knew that arguing further was pointless. He had heard that tone in Michael's voice only a handful of times, and it always meant that a decision had been made from which there was no retreat. Yes, sir, David said softly. Executing now. Michael hung up. He stood by the window, looking not at the city, but at some distant point in his own past, the countless slights, the quiet indignities. The doors slammed in his face. He had swallowed it all, channeled it into ambition, and built a fortress of success to protect his children. Today, that fortress had been breached, and he was about to unleash its full arsenal in retaliation. The world, he decided, needed to learn that there were consequences for messing with Michael Anderson's sons. While Michael Anderson was setting a digital fire, Liam and Noah were still standing in the analog purgatory of Gateford to be. The gangway had been retracted. Through the vast window, they watched as their ship, Sapphire Seas Voyage 118, was pushed back from the gate, its engines beginning their low, powerful whine. A profound sense of defeat washed over them. They had lost. Susan Pierce was typing with a renewed sense of vigor, closing out the voyage. In her mind, she had done her job. She had followed a recently circulated internal memo about being extra vigilant with last-minute ticket changes or unusual passenger behavior, a directive so vague it was essentially a license to profile the twins, two young black men in penthouse suite whose tickets had been purchased by a third party. Their father fit her biased interpretation of the memo perfectly. She had identified a potential risk and neutralized it. She felt a small, satisfying thrill of authority. It was then that her world began to unravel. Her computer screen, displaying Sapphire Sea's proprietary voyage management software, a sleek blue and white interface, powered by Apex Solutions, flickered. Then it went blank. A single error message appeared in stark white text. Network connection severed. API key revoked. Error code Omega 7. Susan stared at it, bewildered. She tried to reboot the system. Nothing. She jiggled the mouse, a futile gesture against a problem that was happening thousands of miles away. She picked up her desk phone to call IT. The line was dead. A moment later, the large departure screen above the gate flickered and switched to a default port information display. Voyage 118 had vanished. A wave of confusion rippled through the embarkation staff at the neighboring podiums. Their screens were all blank. Their phones were all dead. A panicked voice crackled over a supervisor's walkie-talkie. All Sapphire Sea systems are down. I repeat, all systems are down. We can't access manifests. We can't print boarding passes. We can't do anything. Out on the water, Voyage 118, which had been maneuvering for departure, suddenly stopped. Without the digital handshake from the central command system, the captain couldn't get final clearance for departure. The ship was stuck. Liam and Noah watched, their jaws agape. This was beyond anything they could have imagined. Dad, Noah whispered, as if the man himself were a deity who commanded lightning from the heavens. The first ripple of chaos was about to become a tidal wave. At that exact moment, Sapphire Sea's vice president of North American operations, a harried man named Mark Johnson, was in a meeting at the company's headquarters in Dallas. His assistant burst in unannounced, her face pale. Sir, we have a catastrophic failure. Every single one of our systems just went dark. Check-in, booking, ops, baggage handling, it's all gone. Apex Solutions has cut us off. Johnson felt the blood drain from his face. What? That's impossible. They can't just cut us off. We have a $100 million a year contract. I don't know what to tell you, sir. Their CTO is on the line. He says it was a direct order from their CEO, Michael Anderson. The name hit Johnson like a physical blow. He knew Michael Anderson. They had negotiated the final stages of their contract a year ago. He was a brilliant, no-nonsense titan of the industry. He wasn't prone to whims or irrational acts. Something had to have gone terribly, apocalyptically wrong. Johnson grabbed the phone. David, Mark Johnson. What in God's name is going on? Is this a drill? David Kim's voice was weary, stressed. This is not a drill, Mark. We have executed Protocol Omega-7. All services to Sapphire Seas have been suspended until further notice. On what grounds? You're grounding our entire global fleet. We're talking about billions in losses, a logistical nightmare of epic proportions. On whose authority? On the authority of my CEO, David said. I believe he had a personal grievance with your staff at the port of Miami concerning his two sons, Liam and Noah Anderson, at Gateford to be. The specificity of the information was chilling. Johnson frantically motioned for his assistant to get the Miami station manager on the phone. He covered the receiver, his mind reeling. Two sons, an embarkation staffer. This is about a gate agent. It was like using a nuclear bomb to kill a spider. David, listen to me, Johnson said, trying to keep his voice from shaking with rage. Whatever happened, we can fix it. Put the system back online, and I will personally handle this. This is an insane overreaction. With all due respect, Mark, my orders come from Michael, and he seemed to believe the situation warranted it. I suggest you talk to him. And with that, David Kim hung up. Johnson slammed the phone down. His assistant finally got the Miami manager on the line. What is happening at Gateford to be? Johnson roared, foregoing any pleasantries. The manager, a man caught completely flat-footed, stammered out the story as he understood it from a panicked Susan Pierce. Sir, we had two passengers denied boarding, a security flag, the embarkation staffer. Susan Pierce said they were agitated, and who were they? Johnson demanded. Named are Liam and Noah Anderson, sir. Anderson. Johnson felt a cold dread crystallize in his stomach. He had connected the dots, and the picture they formed was one of utter catastrophe, brought on by a single low-level employee's colossal error in judgment. He got Michael Anderson's direct cell number from his contacts. He knew this was the most important phone call of his career. Michael answered on the second ring. His voice was unnervingly calm. Mr. Johnson, Michael, what is this? What have you done? I've merely paused our business relationship to prevent further damage to my family's dignity. Michael replied, his words precise and cold. Your employee at Miami, a woman named Susan, decided that my sons, two Yale students on their way to a summer internship, were a security threat. She publicly humiliated them and denied them boarding on a voyage. They were ticketed for a penthouse suite. When I attempted to intervene, she dismissed me. So, I was forced to escalate the matter. Escalate? Johnson sputtered. Michael, you've grounded over 800 voyages. There are 100,000 people who will be stranded tonight. You're going to be on the front page of every newspaper in the world. This is corporate terrorism. And what would you call what your employee did? Michael shot back, his voice finally cracking with the rage simmering beneath the surface. My boys have had to endure 1,000 tiny cuts like this their whole lives. They've been followed in stores. They've been pulled over for driving a nice car in the wrong neighborhood. They've been told to be quiet, to be patient, to not make a scene. Well, I am done with that. Today, the world makes a scene for them. Today, Sapphire Seas gets to feel just for a few hours what it's like to be powerless and singled out for no good reason. A heavy silence filled the line. Johnson understood that he wasn't talking to a business partner anymore. He was talking to a father with an arsenal of digital weapons and a will to use them. What do you want? Johnson asked, his voice now one of desperate supplication. Tell me what you want and I'll make it happen. It's very simple, Mark, Michael said. First, you will find Susan Pierce. You will escort her to my son's, where she will deliver a personal, heartfelt, and public apology for her disgusting behavior. Second, you will have the captain of Voyage 118 return that ship to the gate. My sons will be personally escorted onto the ship by the station manager. They will be seated in their assigned penthouse suites. Third, you will issue a public statement from Sapphire Seas admitting fault and outlining the new anti-BS training protocols you will be implementing effective immediately. Once I have confirmation from my sons that all of these conditions have been met, I will instruct my CTO to restore your systems. Johnson's mind spun. The demands were outrageous. A corporate CEO dictating terms like a conquering general. But what choice did he have? Every minute that passed was costing the line millions of dollars and shredding its reputation. I understand, Johnson stammered. Consider it done. He hung up the phone. A broken man. He looked at his assistant. Get me the Miami station manager back on the line, and find me that embarkation staffer. Find Susan Pierce. Her career with this line is over. But before it is, she has an apology to make. Back at gate for to be, the chaos was cresting. Passengers from cancelled voyages were beginning to swarm the customer service desks. But amidst the growing pandemonium, a strange, quiet drama was unfolding. The station manager, a man with sweat beading on his forehead, was power walking toward the gate, dragging a stunned and pale Susan Pierce by the arm. And out on the water, to the utter astonishment of everyone watching, Sapphire Seas Voyage 118, the ship that had left the Anderson twins behind, slowly, impossibly, began to make its way back to the gate. The sight of the massive cruise ship reversing its journey was surreal. The laws of port physics seemed to bend to an invisible, powerful will. The whine of its engines shifted from a roar of departure to a grumble of submission. For the passengers on board, confusion reigned. The captain's voice, tight with professional restraint, came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We apologize for the delay. Due to an unforeseen logistical issue on the ground, we are required to return to the gate. We appreciate your patience, and will provide you with more information as soon as we have it. A collective groan went through the cabin. Business deals would be missed, vacations shortened, connections jeopardized. None of them knew their inconvenience was a pawn in a deeply personal war being waged from 50 stories above Chicago. At the gate, the station manager, whose name was Tom Davis, arrived with Susan Pierce in tow. His face was a mask of pure panic. Hers was a canvas of disbelief and dawning horror. She was beginning to understand that the angry voice on the phone was not just some overprotective father. He was something else entirely. Tom Davis approached Liam and Noah, his demeanor fawning and deeply apologetic. Mr. Anderson, I am so sorry for this egregious misunderstanding. There were no words. He then turned to Susan, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Go on. Susan looked at the two young men she had so casually dismissed less than an hour ago. They were no longer just passengers. They were the arbiters of her fate, the scions of the man who had brought a global corporation to a standstill. Her face was flushed, her eyes darting around at the watching crowd, a gallery of witnesses to her humiliation. I am sorry, she stammered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. I made a mistake. My judgment was flawed. I deeply regret the distress I have caused you. It was a forced, robotic apology devoid of any genuine remorse, but it was enough to meet the letter of the demand. Liam, ever the firebrand, just stared at her, his expression cold and unyielding. He offered no absolution. Noah, however, felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't pity, but a queasy discomfort at the spectacle of this woman's complete and utter debasement. The power dynamic had shifted so violently. It felt unnatural, like watching a film run in reverse. The gangway reconnected to the ship with a heavy thud. We will escort you on board now, Tom Davis said, practically bowing. Your suites are waiting. Please, right this way. As Liam and Noah walked down the gangway, a path cleared for them by the terrified station manager. They could feel the eyes of the other passengers boring into them. They were no longer just two guys who had been wronged. They were the cause of this massive disruption. The whispers followed them. That's them. What did they do? Can you believe this? Holding up a whole ship for them. They stepped onto the ship and into a cabin thick with resentment. The stewards, their smiles strained, greeted them with an icy professionalism. As they walked the aisle to their penthouse suites, every head turned. The Millers, the couple in the beige vests who had offered them a pitying look earlier, now stared with open animosity. They settled into their plush accommodations, the soft leather feeling less like a luxury and more like an indictment. The victory felt hollow. This wasn't the justice Liam had envisioned. He had wanted accountability, not a forced, resentful capitulation. He had wanted respect, not fear. Noah pulled out his phone and sent a simple text to their father. "We're on." In Chicago, Michael Anderson received the text. He took a deep breath and made the second most important call of the day. "David, they're on the ship. Restore the system. Thank God." David Kimbridge restoring now. Across the globe, thousands of computer screens at Sapphire Seas gates and offices flickered back to life. The Apex Solutions logo appeared, then the familiar blue and white interface. Phones started ringing again. Departure boards were populated with voyage information. The machine began to grind back into motion. But the damage was done. The shutdown had lasted for 1 hour and 27 minutes. During that time, 158 Sapphire Seas voyages worldwide had been grounded. Another 312 had been delayed, creating a cascading effect that would ripple through the global cruise travel system for days. The initial cost estimate was a staggering $80 million in lost revenue, passenger compensation, and logistical overtime. The reputational damage was incalculable. As Voyage 118 finally departed from the port of Miami, climbing high above the sprawling lights of Los Angeles, Liam and Noah sat in silence. The promised ice cream sundae was served, but neither of them touched it. The righteous anger that had fueled them had cooled, leaving behind a strange, unsettling residue. They had won. Their father had used his immense power to right a wrong, to deliver a consequence so immediate and overwhelming that it would become a legend in the annals of customer service complaints. But as Noah looked out the window at the dark expanse of the Pacific Ocean, he couldn't shake a terrifying thought. Power like that, wielded so personally and so destructively, wasn't a tool. It was a storm, and storms are indiscriminate. They don't just destroy their intended target. They flatten everything in their path. Their father had unleashed a hurricane to prove a point, and Noah had a sinking feeling that they were all about to be caught in the blowback. The victory felt less like a triumph and more like the eerie calm at the eye of the storm. By the time Sapphire Seas Voyage 118 was over the open ocean, the story had already exploded online. It hadn't come from a press release or an official statement. It came, as most modern stories do, from a cell phone video. A passenger at the gate across from Furtiby, a travel blogger named Jessica Reed, had filmed the entire saga. She captured the initial denial, Liam's heated exchange with Susan, the inexplicable return of the ship, and the forced public apology. She uploaded the 10-minute clip to her YouTube channel, with a clickbait but accurate title, "CEO Dad Shuts Down Entire Cruise Line After Sons Racially Profiled at Port Terminal." The video went supernova. Within hours, it had millions of views. #SapphirSeashund and #AndersonPowerPlay were trending worldwide on X, formerly Twitter. The internet, as it is wont to do, fractured into fiercely opposing camps. One side hailed Michael Anderson as a hero. He was the ultimate black father protecting his sons with righteous fury. He was a symbol of black power, finally flipping the script on systemic racism. Memes proliferated. Michael Anderson's face photoshopped onto the body of a Marvel superhero. Susan Pierce's face on a Karen bobblehead. Op-eds were written, praising his proportional response to an act of deep-seated prejudice. He had, they argued, simply used the tools of capitalism to fight the injustices perpetuated by it. The other side was equally vociferous, but saw him as a villain. To them, he was a reckless, arrogant billionaire who had abused his corporate power for a personal vendetta. He was a tech tyrant who had endangered the public, stranded thousands of innocent people, some of whom were undoubtedly on their way to funerals, weddings, or critical medical appointments, all to settle a score with a single embarkation staffer. The Wall Street Journal and Forbes ran scathing editorials about the dangers of unchecked CEO power and the fragility of our interconnected infrastructure. Michael Anderson, who had expected some media attention, was unprepared for the sheer scale of the firestorm. He landed in Chicago to a phalanx of news reporters waiting for him at the private airfield. He issued a terse, unapologetic statement. My actions were those of a father protecting his children. Any disruption to the public, while regrettable, was a direct result of the unacceptable actions of Sapphire C staff. I would do it again. The last sentence, I would do it again, was gasoline on the fire. While the public debated the morality of his actions, the corporate world was having a much more pragmatic and terrified reaction. The board of directors of Apex Solutions was in full-blown panic mode. Their company, once a quiet B2B behemoth, was now at the center of a global controversy. Their stock, which had been a steady, reliable climber for years, took a nosedive in the first 24 hours. After the incident, Apex Solutions lost 15% of its value, a paper loss of over $10 billion. The reason was simple: trust. Apex's entire business model was built on being a reliable, invisible partner. They were the stable foundation upon which other companies built their empires. But Michael had just shown the world that he was willing to dynamite the foundation over a personal issue. CEOs of their other client companies, banks, shipping conglomerates, other cruise lines were making panicked calls. Could he do this to them? If a bank teller was rude to his wife, would he freeze her financial systems? The act intended to demonstrate his power had instead revealed his volatility. He had turned his greatest asset, the keys to the kingdom, into his greatest liability. An emergency board meeting was called. Michael found himself sitting at the head of the long mahogany table, where he had reigned supreme for 2 decades. But the atmosphere was different. The deference was gone, replaced by a mixture of fear and anger. Michael, what were you thinking? Demanded Eleanor Hayes, a veteran board member and a longtime mentor to Michael. Her voice was sharp with disbelief. We are hemorrhaging value, our clients are spooked. Salesforce and Oracle are already circling, trying to poach our most nervous accounts. They're selling a new product, stability. I was thinking about my sons, Eleanor. Michael shot back, his jaw tight. I was thinking about the promise I made to them, that the world I built would be better for them than the one I grew up in. This isn't about that, and you know it, retorted another board member, a private equity shark named Robert Sutton. This is about fiduciary duty. You used a corporate asset, our most powerful and dangerous tool, as your personal sledgehammer. You didn't just ground Sapphire Seas. You've put our entire company at risk. The lawsuits from Sapphire Seas alone will be astronomical. Sapphire Seas broke the terms of our partnership first by allowing discriminatory practices that reflect poorly on us as their software provider, Michael argued, deploying the same flimsy legal justification he'd used with his CTO. Nobody is buying that, Michael, Eleanor said, her voice rising. The legal argument is a joke, and you know it. This was a personal act of vengeance. We all support you as a father. We are all horrified by what happened to your sons. But the response, it was biblical. It was disproportionate. It was a catastrophic failure of judgment. Michael looked around the table at the faces of the people who had helped him build his empire. He saw no allies. They were looking at him not as a righteous father but as a liability, a rogue element that threatened the stability of the entire enterprise. For the first time in a very long time, Michael Anderson felt his own power beginning to slip. He had won the battle at Gate for to be, but he was now on the verge of losing his entire kingdom. The world had seen the awesome, terrifying power he wielded, and now both the public and his own company were beginning to wonder if any one man should be allowed to hold that much power at all. The karma, it turned out, wasn't just coming for the embarkation staffer. It was coming for the king. The first sign that the story was about to take a much darker turn came not from the financial pages or the tech blogs, but from a local news station in Portland, Oregon. It was a human interest piece, the kind that usually gets lost in the 24-hour news cycle. But this one was different. It was an interview with a tearful woman named Maria Gomez. Her husband, a 42-year-old construction worker named Luis Gomez, had been waiting for a new heart for 3 years. He was at the top of the transplant list that night, the night of the Sapphire Seas shutdown. They had gotten the call. A donor heart, a perfect match, had become available in San Francisco. A private transfer was on standby, but the surgeon, Dr. Annabelle Chase, one of the top cardiac specialists in the country, was in Los Angeles. She had been scheduled to travel from the port of Los Angeles to Portland on Sapphire Sea's voyage 2351. Her voyage, like every other Sapphire Sea's voyage, had been held at the port. In the interview, a distraught Maria Gomez explained the timeline with chilling precision. The donor heart was viable for a maximum of 6 hours outside the body. Dr. Chase's voyage was cancelled by the time Sapphire Sea's systems were back online, and they could rebook her on another mode of transport. A critical 3-hour window had been lost. She arrived in Portland too late. The heart was no longer viable. Luis Gomez was sent back home, his chance at life gone. They told us he might not get another chance, Maria wept into the camera, her body shaking with grief. The doctor. She was stuck because of some fight at the port. Some CEO's kids had a problem with their sweets. And so my husband, my Luis. He might die because of an argument over sweets. The story was a bombshell. It instantly reframed the entire narrative. This was no longer a debate about racism versus corporate overreach. It was now a story about a family who had become collateral damage in a billionaire's personal war. Luis Gomez's face was suddenly everywhere, his story providing a devastating human counterpoint to the triumphant narrative of the Anderson family. The media turned on Michael Anderson with a breathtaking ferocity. The same outlets that had cautiously praised his bold stand now ran headlines that were dripping with condemnation. The CEO who played God. How a billionaire's rage cost a father a heart. From hero to villain, the tragic human cost of the Anderson power play. Penthouse suite problem. Working class tragedy. The story of Susan Pierce also reemerged, but in a new light. She gave an exclusive interview to a major news network. She was contrite, admitting her actions were hasty and her judgment poor. She spoke of the immense pressure on embarkation staff, the vague and confusing security memos, and the stress of her job. She never claimed she wasn't wrong, but she painted a picture of a flawed human being making a mistake, not a monstrous villain. She had lost her job, her reputation, and was now facing relentless online harassment. But her suffering paled in comparison to the story of Luis Gomez. Public sympathy, which had been non-existent for her, began to shift. She was a catalyst, yes, but the true villain was now Michael Anderson. The man whose response was not just disproportionate, but deadly. The karma was swift, brutal, and relentless for Michael. The news was a gut punch that knocked the air from his lungs. He saw the story on CNN, watching Maria Gomez's face contort in pain, and felt a profound, soul-crushing sickness. This was the unforeseen consequence, the innocent life caught in the blast radius of his rage. He hadn't just stranded people. He had potentially signed a man's death warrant. The certainty and righteousness that had fueled him completely evaporated, replaced by a chasm of guilt. For Liam and Noah, now in London, the news was even more devastating. Their victory, which already felt hollow, was now stained with blood. They were no longer the wronged victims. They were the pampered sons of a monster. Their internship, the reason for the voyage, became a source of shame. They would walk into the incubator office and feel the weight of whispered conversations and sideways glances. They were the kids whose father let a man lose a heart. The anger Liam had felt at the gate seemed like a petty indulgence now. The humiliation they had suffered was nothing compared to the agony of the Gomez family. He replayed the events in his head. His own anger, his demand for his father's intervention, his satisfaction at Susan's downfall. It all felt grotesque in retrospect. He had wanted justice, but what he had gotten felt like a curse. The most cutting blow came in the form of a lawsuit. The Gomez family, represented pro bono by a high-profile civil rights attorney who specialized in corporate malfeasance, filed a massive lawsuit not against Sapphire Seas, but directly against Michael Anderson and Apex Solutions. The charge wasn't breach of contract. It was wrongful death and reckless endangerment. The legal battle would be titanic, but the court of public opinion had already reached its verdict. Michael Anderson, the self-made man, the protector of his family, the titan of industry, was now irrevocably cast as a villain. He had flown too close to the sun, not on wings of wax, but on wings of righteous fury. And now he was falling, but the whole world watching as he crashed and burned. His hard karma had arrived, and it was far more cruel and unforgiving than he could have ever imagined. It wasn't the loss of money or power that haunted him in the sleepless nights that followed. It was the face of a man he had never met, and the chilling realization that in his quest for justice for his sons, he had delivered the ultimate injustice to a complete stranger. The fallout was a slow, agonizing bleed. The Gomez lawsuit became a national spectacle, a David and Goliath story for the modern age. Maria Gomez's quiet dignity on the witness stand was a powerful indictment. She didn't need to be dramatic. She just had to tell her story. The story of a beeping pager, a moment of pure joy, followed by hours of frantic, helpless waiting, and the final, crushing news from a devastated surgeon, Michael Anderson's. Defense attorneys argued that the shutdown was a legitimate response to a security concern, a desperate attempt to frame his actions within the cold logic of corporate law. But no one, not the jury, not the press, and certainly not Michael himself, believed it. The prosecution played the audio from his phone call with Mark Johnson, the Sapphire Seas VP. Michael's voice, cold and furious, echoed through the courtroom. Today, Sapphire Seas gets to feel just for a few hours what it's like to be powerless. It was the voice of a man seeking vengeance, not security. In the end, the jury found Apex Solutions and Michael Anderson personally liable for a sum that was historic: $250 million in damages to the Gomez family. It was a symbolic number, a punishment designed to send a message to the entire corporate world. But the financial penalty was the least of it. The Apex Solutions board, facing a shareholder revolt and a catastrophic loss of client confidence, asked for Michael's resignation. There was no fight left in him. He had built the company from a dream in his garage into a global powerhouse, and now he was being exiled from his own kingdom. He walked away from the company he loved, a titan laid low not by a competitor or a market crash, but by his own hubris. His relationship with his sons became strained, weighed down by a shared, unspoken guilt. The London internship, meant to be a launch pad for their careers, became a crucible. Liam, the fiery debater, became withdrawn and quiet. The certainty that had always defined him was gone, replaced by a haunting introspection. He changed his major from political science to ethics and public policy, driven by a need to understand the complex machinery of power and consequence. Noah, the logical coder, threw himself into his work, but his focus has shifted. He began developing a free, open-source logistics platform for nonprofits, specifically designed to help coordinate organ transplant transfers and other time-sensitive medical deliveries. It was his penance, his attempt to build something good from the wreckage his family had caused. The brothers, who had been inseparable, now found it difficult to look each other in the eye, each seeing a reflection of their collective mistake. Susan Pierce, the embarkation staffer who started it all, became an unlikely advocate for industry reform. After being fired from Sapphire Seas, she faded from the public eye for a time. She eventually resurfaced, giving talks at cruise industry conferences about the dangers of implicit bias and the need for better training and clearer, more humane corporate directives. She never excused her actions on that day, but she used her notoriety to push for change, ensuring that the vague memos that allowed for profiling were replaced with concrete ethical guidelines. She found a new purpose, not in a position of authority, but as a cautionary tale. Sapphire Seas, after a massive settlement with Apex Solutions and a complete overhaul of its executive leadership, launched the Gomez Initiative, a program that provided free, dedicated rapid transfers for organ transplant teams, ensuring that timing and commercial voyage delays would never again stand in the way of a life-saving procedure. The story of the Anderson family became a modern-day fable taught in business schools and law schools. It was a case study in the abuse of power, the nature of consequence, and the fallacy of believing that the ends, no matter how righteous they seem, can justify devastating means. Michael Anderson, stripped of his company and his public standing, retreated from the world. He paid the settlement, issued a formal public apology to the Gomez family, and then vanished. He spent his days in his quiet Chicago home, the glass walls of his former office replaced by drawn curtains. The power that had defined him was gone. All that was left was a father who, in a desperate, rage-fueled attempt to protect his sons from a minor injustice, had inadvertently caused an unforgivable one. His victory at the port of Miami had lasted for 1 hour and 27 minutes, but the reckoning, he knew, would last for the rest of his life. This story serves as a chilling reminder that in our hyper-connected world, the actions of a single person can trigger a cascade of unforeseen and tragic consequences. It forces us to ask difficult questions. Where is the line between righteous anger and reckless vengeance? How do we hold systems accountable for prejudice without harming the innocent people caught within them? Michael Anderson's story is not just about a CEO's fall from grace. It's a profound cautionary tale about power, responsibility, and the devastating, real-life cost of a battle won at any price. The hard truth is that sometimes, even when you start with the right intentions, the karma that hits back isn't justice. It's a tragedy that marks everyone involved forever. If this story moved you, if it made you think, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world. What would you have done in Michael Anderson's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. Black twins denied boarding until their phone call to CEO dad pulls the plug on voyages.